Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. First and foremost, thank you so much for the support you guys have shown us in our previous videos. Please go on liking and sharing, and in case of any other kind of content you guys would like us to do, please do tell us in the comment section, okay? So for today, we're going to talk about construction law. What is construction law? And for this discussion, we're going to be joined by two construction lawyers who are actually based in Ghana, and they will tell us their general view of the construction industry and specifically matters to do with law. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Be a beacon of hope to the rest of us who are still trying to get the hang of things in all this. Welcome, Sonia. We are honored to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mhm. So, if I would start by asking, I don't know how you're going to take terms. I'm guessing
Hapana.
you're going to start, Mrs. Ekwa, and then we're going to have Lawyer Ezekiel take us through your different views of how this construction law field works. So, if we start with you, Mrs. Ekwa.
Wow. Okay, when you talk of construction law, it's an amount of so many areas of mostly commercial. You also have employment law there. And so when you talk of and it's got to also do with things like, I mean, you have corporate aspects of the law in there as well. So when you talk of construction law, of course you're dealing with contractors, you're dealing with you're there for, like, either you're there for the employer or you're there for the contractor. And also you're there to see to it that everything, the legal aspects from the start of any construction work right through to finish or completion, there's compliance with rules and regulations and the laws. So it entails so many aspects of the law, like I mentioned, commercial, contract, real estate law, property law, because of course you're going to have people working on there. Of course, they're going to be engaged either on a temporary basis as casuals, or you have your permanent workers there, let's say like if they are foremen or project managers or engineers and all those. And all those come under employment or labor law. So of course you have that, and also to see things to do with planning, ensure that your the requisite permits have been obtained, and also to do with health and safety at the work site. So when you talk of construction law, it entails various aspects of the law. You must be very versatile. You must have grasp over various areas of the law, particularly to do with business and commercial aspects of the law. So basically, that's what it is.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Ekwa. Yes, to you, Lawyer Ezekiel. What is construction law to you?
Also, just like my colleague had mentioned, when you're talking about construction law, the main focus, like she mentioned, you are talking regarding issues of compliance. We have seen of recent how construction works, how numerous lives are lost as a result of non-compliance to certain regulations, that ought to have been put in place. And so the purpose why we now have construction law is to bring to awareness of people that there are certain regulations, that you must meet up to, just to ensure that there is compliance and that things are done normally. The basic, we still have to go back to a law of contracts. You mentioned that you are students, and I'm also very sure that you are conversant with the basic laws of contracts. So construction laws is also an offshoot of contract law. It emanates from contract as well, because everything we're going to discuss regarding construction, like my colleague had mentioned, it still centers on contracts. and especially issues of employers and employees. What are the regulations and all of that that ought to have been put in place to save life and all of that. So I think, like you mentioned, yes, before now, we didn't have a branch of law regarding construction, as it were. But right now, there is a shift towards ensuring that we now have a branch of law that regulates issues of construction so as to save life. I think that's my contribution.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Can I add that one aspect of law that we also have to be mindful of is procurement. Procurement laws as well, so that of course, before even the whole contract starts, that's the stage you must go through to ensure that contractors qualify to take on a job, so that the procurement laws are adhered to, so that you don't have issues. And that's also a very important area when it comes to construction law. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And if I may ask, as of course we're starting with Mrs. Ekwa, have you diversified in your construction law? Are you just practicing basically construction law in specific areas, like maybe let's say specifically buildings or road networks, that is, or are you just generally a construction lawyer?
With general construction lawyers, because I think in our part of the world, you will create a niche, but our systems and economy in our part of the world sometimes does not allow you to create niche like you have in the Western world, because we have very small economies for you. But yes, once you're into construction law, of course, like I said, you must have knowledge in these other areas of law, because what is construction law? It's not just one area. It entails, like we've explained, various areas. So that if I'm into construction, I must know, and if my client is, let's say, into real estate, of course, then I must be able to advise him in that regard. If he's into road construction, it's basically the same thing, because it means that he's going to go into an agreement with someone. He's going to go through tendering systems to be qualified. And then through that, he's going to have to go into various arrangements and agreements. And then he has to, like we're saying, make sure that he complies with all the rules and regulations. So in that regard, you must be versatile. You must be versatile, yes.
Okay. That is good to know. That for you, if I'm getting you clearly, you said you're diverse. You've diversified in your field, which I also think is a good thing, because it actually gives you more chances. It doesn't restrict you, or rather confine you to just specific areas, so you can actually deal with everything, right? If I got you well. Okay. And you, lawyer Ezekiel, what is your view? Like, do you practice law as a whole, or have you majored in construction law? And if construction law, are you majoring in specific areas, or are you diverse in each and every?
Okay, like my colleague mentioned, at the moment, considering the fact that our economy is a very small one, you cannot at the moment choose to major only on construction. You'll be stranded along the line. Because it's a fresh area of law. But like my colleague had mentioned, at the moment we are into construction, but not like our major practice. Because we have earlier mentioned that there are so many areas of law that come to play when you're talking about construction. I'm sure with time, there will be a paradigm shift where we will not have to major only on construction, but at the moment, we are taking it as the briefs come. So when the briefs come, we take them in, but with time, we will not have construction lawyers, so to speak, lawyers, so to speak. But for the moment, we are just taking the briefs as they come, and in that regard.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Ezekiel. I absolutely agree with you that as we proceed in this modern society, we're still growing, we're still having all these advancements. And of course, with time, we're going to have more construction lawyers, just as you have said. So I think it's a beautiful thing that for now, you're diversified, and actually when that time comes, you'll even be even more conversant with that construction law field. So, okay, actually more interested in knowing how long have you been in practice? How long have you served in this field? Mrs. Ekua.
It's my 12th year of practice.
Almost as old as you are.
That's literally almost as old as we are.
Almost, not yet, almost.
And you, Mr. Ezekiel?
Okay, the journey of 1,000 miles, starts with just one, I'm close to that same years as well. So, but that's not an issue. It is not the duration. It's not the number of years that actually matters.
Yeah.
It has to do with the impact you are making in that field, and the passion as well. So I think we have counted some years, in practice.
Okay.
That makes perfect.
Okay, thank you. So I'm also wondering, in Ghana, of course, this is Kenya, that is Ghana. What is the difference of construction law there? Because, okay, here, construction law is just basically majorly cases to do with things like corruption or buildings collapsing or accidents in construction sites, such things that actually come majorly, or rather stem from breaching of contracts law, as Mr. Ezekiel had formally said, or rather mentioned. So how does construction law look in Ghana? What is construction law in Ghana?
Construction law in Ghana, I believe, is the same everywhere, because everywhere where the people are building and constructing, I think it's the same hazards and risks, irrespective of whether it's Kenya or Ghana or wherever, because the risks are almost similar. I mean, when you're constructing, there are hazards. You could have injuries. You could have injuries occurring at the workplaces. You could have breach of contract. You could have default situations where, for instance, the contractor is not really performing. You could have breach situations where, let's say, the employer is not really making payments as required in the clauses in there. And you could have, several liability situations. You have situations of insurance coming in, and all of those. And I believe it runs across the board. So yes, what you find in Kenya is what you find in Ghana too.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And Lawyer Ezekiel, do you have any different view or something to add on that?
Oh, like my boss has mentioned, that is exactly what happens here. But I think just the little addition I will add to that is that construction laws here in Ghana were more concerned with maintaining standard in construction, in the field of construction, be it road, building, like you mentioned, and all of those, how to ensure that standards are maintained and that regulations, governmental regulations are kept, and that's the reason why my boss had earlier mentioned that issues of procurement, are also followed strictly to ensure that you don't just give construction work to anyone, but there has to be a certain criteria you must meet before you are allowed to engage in any form of construction as well, so that issues of standard is maintained. I think that's the same thing over there in Kenya, and what obtains in Kenya is the same thing here, and I think in almost all the entire world. So construction is the same.
Okay, thank you so much. And if I may ask, of course, when you're constructing a building, the three main things that you look at, that is cost, the quality of your work, and the time that it's supposed to take. And I'm sure that those things are also factored in when we're dealing with construction law. That is, if any of the three factors are interfered with, so what challenges might you have faced when dealing with such situations that involve the three main factors in your years of practice?
Like we said, depending on who your client is. But let me start generally with, let us go into the procurement process, right? So that assuming you are the employer, and when I talk of the employer, it means that you, the person who wants works done for you. And this is what I'll call like a procurement entity or whatever, whether it's an individual, you want a building constructed for you, or it's a government that wants roads constructed, or buildings, or a hospital, or whatever. There must be like a procurement plan that sets out all the requirements you want and everything. So once you have a procurement plan, that plan guides you to ensure, like they're saying, that there's strict compliance with your own plan. And one of the requirements is that there must be what you call competitive tendering. You don't just get up, well, if you're an individual, you can decide to just contract someone, right, to come and do some work for you. But assuming it's a whole institution, you must have a plan that sets out that one of the requirements is that there must be competitive tendering. I believe even if it's an individual and you want some construction work done for you, you'd still want to assess one or two or three people to see who best qualifies. So even in an informal way, that's still competitive tendering in a way, because you want to speak to one or two people. So in your plan, there must be a process for competitive tendering where you'd state in there what exactly works you want carried out, right? And then the duration of the works and everything. And then what you invite people to come in. Of course, the amounts involved in everything. So what you do is you just invite people to come in and tender for the contract. And in doing so, when you in the invitation, of course, you must set out all the requirements and that you want, the processes and procedures. You must set them out so that anyone who has an interest and comes in has information on what they have to do in order to be able to satisfy your requirements for them to qualify for whatever works you want to give them. And of course, you must not discriminate in any way. Whatever the requirements are must be the same for anybody who comes in. So I believe that is the first stage. You invite people to come in and tender. It's called tendering for the processes and all that. Of course, there's pre-qualification as well. The pre-qualification is, of course, to let people know what exactly you want done, Sometimes you may want to take them, let's say, to the website to see what has to be done. And then, of course, when they have viewed whatever works that has to be done, they come back. And then based on whatever the contract sum is, of course, people would bid. And then in bidding, you may want to go, the requirement is that you may want to go for the lowest bidder. But of course, the process must be very open and transparent as well. Yeah, must be open and transparent. In tendering, in order to ensure that there are no issues, one of this is to ensure that those people coming in tendering, you must make them aware that these are the professional and technical qualifications and competencies I want for the job to be done. So let's say I want a road construction done. I want a contractor who has this number of years experience. I want a contractor who maybe has this level of grade of qualification, number of years of experience within that field and the kind of jobs the person has done. And then the competence, the personnel who would be, of course, carrying on the works. You may have a requirement of the kind of personnel you want in there. And of course, the next thing that you want to do is look at their financial capability to be able to complete or commence the work and go through. So that is also another requirement. In doing that, sometimes you may want to see their financial capability, their strength as an institution. One of the other things is that if I want a road constructed or I want a building, I want to see what kind of equipment you have for you to be able to execute the job properly. Do you have the necessary equipment? If it's a road construction, do you have all the machines that have to be used and all of that? And of course, the managerial capability as well. I mentioned that already and all that. And so those are some of the things you may want to ensure. And then that would be the basis upon which you may even want to contract someone to start working. So that is it. Once that has been followed, you won't have too many issues. If someone bids or brings in a tender, you have to go through all these requirements. And if there are any issues, you may want them to come and clarify all these issues. You may want to ensure that everything is okay before you even go ahead to even sign a contract with them, because you may have gone through and the person may have qualified in the sense that they've met all the requirements. And of course, they are the lowest bidder because you want the one who can execute the work with the lowest amount possible and all that. So I mean, to you. So these are some of the requirements that you have to go through. So as a lawyer, if I'm advising my client, I have to make sure that in order not for there to be any disputes or any issues coming up, I'm supposed to guide my client. If the client is an employer, to ensure that all these procurement plans and processes are in place so that you don't have someone coming in to say that you have discriminated and on what basis did you choose one contractor against the other. But if all the requirements are there, it saves everyone legal tussle. Yes.
Because you only work with professionals and
yeah, okay. In addition to what my boss had just mentioned, beyond the technical qualification, another important thing we consider is professional qualification. When you talk about construction, you are actually talking about engineering. Whichever field of construction, engineering is called. And it's important that those whom you are assigning the work of construction, as at the time you are engaging them, they are professionally competent and that they have valid license, before you be able to assign any job to them. So that's important, because if anything happens, it's just like a driver on the road. If the driver hits someone, the first thing we want to know is, do you have a license authorizing you to even be on the road? So the same thing at the construction work, before we even talk about the technical qualification and all of those, do you have the competence, the qualification, and that the regulatory body that you have ascribed to as an engineer, do they identify you, and do you have a valid license with them? I think these are some of the additions that we also consider. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Ezekiel. I can see we are running short of time, but before we actually end the meeting, I'd like to give my colleague Sonia a chance or an opportunity to ask a question, comment on something before we get the parting shots from Mrs. Zekwa and Ezekiel. Sonia, if you
Hey. Hi everyone.
Hello.
Okay, I won't take much of your time. I have one question. When the client or the contractor is in the wrong in some way, whether they have come short of either acquiring the licenses or adhering to whatever laws that are applicable in the construction, what process do you take, or what process do you undertake to bring them to justice or something of the sort along that line? Yeah, what is the process? What are the steps that you take to bring this matter to order?
Okay. Most commercial agreements now have what you call arbitration clauses in there. Because you realize that most of the associations and organizations are now shifting from the courts, the regular courts, to arbitration. So most commercial agreements will have as a first point of trying to resolve dispute is to go through arbitration. So when you finally agree or choose a contractor, the next thing, of course, is to sign an agreement, which spells out the obligations and responsibilities and whatever, the scope of work, what has to be done. So in the contract, what would you have there? You'd have, of course, the parties in the employer and then the contractor. You have your addresses in there, and then you have what will spell out the scope of work, which is what exactly is the employer expecting the contractor to do. So it spells that in there properly. And then, of course, it would also spell out the duration in which you want the work completed. And then, of course, there are issues like indemnities, who indemnifies who, issues like liability. If you breach and you're unable to perform under this specific period, who is responsible? And then, of course, you have issues with things like claim. Once the contractor starts work, they take ownership of the work site, so that anything, any issues that occur there, injuries and everything, because the contractor has started working, they've taken ownership. So they are to ensure that there's safety on or at the work site. So if there are any injuries occurring there, they bear responsibility. And this is what you now have under what you call the FIDIC contracts, and it's being replicated in other contracts. FIDIC is the international arrangements that regulates constructions and all that. And it spells in there that once the contractor takes ownership of a site and starts working, until there's completion and the employer takes over, the contractor is responsible. So issues like claims and everything must be spelled in there correctly. Of course, I've mentioned start time and finish time and everything. Of course, the contract will also spell out what each person, each contracting party is supposed to do. For instance, you have a 1-year duration contract, and it will spell out that at stipulated times, when you complete, let's say, phase 1, the employer is supposed to, let's say, pay you. You issue a certificate and then employer is supposed to pay you. For instance, you have a contract that won't say you wait till you complete fully before you're paid, but you're paid in phases. So all those things are supposed to spell out in the contract. So for instance, if you have an employer who is not fulfilling his obligations, or you have a situation where a contractor is not fulfilling their obligation, you must have a clause in there that says that I have to notify you that you have breached maybe certain terms in the contract for which I may want to trigger these arbitration clauses, or I may want to trigger dispute resolution. So you may have in there that if you breach, I'm supposed to notify you and give you a specific timeline within which you are supposed to remedy that breach. If you fail to do that, then we may want to trigger dispute resolution clauses. So all those things are spelled out there. Depending on what the parties want to do, they may put in their own clauses. So you can know, once you have those clauses there, it ties the parties in, so that once there's a breach somewhere, I mean, whatever clauses are triggered. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ekwa. Yes, thank you so much. We were happy to have you, and we will actually like to get those party shots in the next meeting. So hold those thoughts, and we will get back to you as soon as we can.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate, and